All right, we're going to get underway. My name is Skip Newberry, President and CEO of TAO. Good afternoon and welcome to the TAO Finance Community event, Raising Capital in a Crisis. We have an excellent group of panelists here today with us who've taken time out of their busy schedules to share their insights with us. A few participation guidelines before we begin. Wow, I look a lot younger in that photo. All participants have been muted. Please remain on mute unless the TAO staff member unmutes you and calls on you to talk. We also ask that you please disable your camera unless you are presenting or speaking. You may ask or respond to questions in the chat box publicly or privately by directing your message to Justin Martinez. We'll monitor the chat box and respond throughout the discussion. We'll be doing a Q&A segment towards the end of today's discussion where we'll use Mentimeter, a new polling and virtual engagement tool. On the screen, you'll see instructions for accessing this app via your web browser or by scanning the QR code. You can use this to follow along with our slides on the screen or skip ahead to pre-submit your questions for our panel of experts leading up to that portion of today's discussion. We'll share this information again when we reach that segment. We also ask you all to engage via the participant icon on your screen, where you may utilize nonverbal communications such as raising your hand, clapping, yes, no, etc. We also ask that you please engage with us on social media during this presentation. We appreciate all the social support, and you can see where to find us on this slide. Due to the limited time, we'll capture all questions in the chat and shift any unanswered ones to Mobilize, our member engagement platform. Mobilize is TAO's member-only virtual community, and we'll post unanswered questions from our members there to keep the conversation going after the event. If you have any questions about Mobilize or about TAO, feel free to reach out to Justin, whose email is on the screen. And if you have any questions about membership, feel free to reach out to membership@techoregon.org. TAO staff support is provided today by Justin, and he's happy to take feedback, questions, and comments. A huge thank you as well to John D'Alfonsi of Roth Capital Partners for underwriting this event. We appreciate their support and their sponsorship. We'll have a couple of more finance community events later this fall on cash flow management and M&A, so stay tuned. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our panelists. This is where they pop back from the ether and activate their videos. There we go. Gang's all here. So I'm going to call on each of the panelists in turn to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their respective companies and kind of walk us through their fundraising journey, kind of high level, just to kind of level set and give everyone an idea of each of the individual panelists' perspectives. And then we'll get into a moderated Q&A. And then from there, we'll get into some audience questions as well that we'll work into today's format. So in no apparent order, other than officially, Sourabh's right below me on my screen. So I'm going to call on him first to kick things off and share a little about himself and his journey so far.
Absolutely, Skip. And you let me know if you want me to change directions here, but I'll just do a quick intro of Mindcurrent because we've been sort of under the radar until recently. And then you'd also like me to cover what our fundraising was like until now in a few minutes? Okay. You got it. Thanks, Skip. So my name is Sourabh Kothari. I'm one of the co-founders of Mindcurrent. And 2 years ago, we had this crazy concept, which is now what we're bringing to market, that each of us actually has enough of our own personal data to understand our own personal stress and performance patterns, that data should belong to us and that we should be able to work off of that. So that's what Mindcurrent is. The best way to describe the company, because then I'm going to shift our conversation to the fundraising journey, was actually given to us by NPR Radio. Some of you know Christian Fodenwenzel. He's a pretty awesome health tech reporter. He came up with what is still the best tagline. Our marketing team can't even get close. He calls us the Fitbit for your brain. And it's so apt because Mindcurrent is actually the first commercially available stress analysis and prediction model. That's the thing that actually put us on the map, is that we don't just analyze your pattern and tell you how you'll do today. You can see how you're going to do tomorrow and up to 2 weeks out. And so that is what Mindcurrent is. So in a nutshell, our fundraising was all bootstrapped, and just two of the co-founders, we built the company over the first 18 months. with a few friends that came in towards the tail end, as often happens when you're bootstrapping. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. And then we realized that we want nothing to do with the consumer wellness space, and that we really need to take this product to organizations, to schools, to companies, to healthcare systems. And oops, you're gonna need some runway for that. So that's when we decided to do something that's actually somewhat, I think, non-traditional here in the Portland, greater Portland area. We crowdfunded. So we did everything wrong. We're a B2B AI, right? Software platform. None of those things do well on crowdfunding. Like any one of those could have killed us. But I guess we were just super fortunate that in March, before COVID hit the US, the awareness hit the US, folks were very gung-ho on HR AI and health AI, and we fall into both. So we raised about $100,000 in the first few weeks of our crowdfunding. Everything was going great. And then all of a sudden people were like, wait, an invasive virus is gonna kill us all. So investment from a crowdfunding perspective just completely died. And we thought it was game over. And so we had this incredible journey where we raised a certain amount of our crowdfunding in like, what, 4 weeks? We went 3 months getting maybe a couple of investors a week, but not stopping, continuing to, we had hundreds of people visiting the site, but very little conversion. And so, you know, my background is marketing and sales, if you can't tell. And so we just started to optimize, because crowdfunding is all about finding the right investor for you, not reaching people who don't want to invest. And Facebook was the mechanism that we funded our platform used. So we just started to optimize and optimize and optimize. And along the way, 2 major things happened. We were selected for the US Air Force. So that was a major update that, wait, there is a B2B enterprise story for us. And then we found out that healthcare providers and mental health service providers actually want us to do their data analysis. So we're like, oh my gosh, thank God we went to B2B, because this is really working out. But the problem is crowdfunding is you can't change your story. You got to stick to one story and run your whole campaign. And I didn't know that. So it wasn't until the last 6 weeks, first 4 weeks, last 6 weeks, just complete uptake. And we ended up raising, our goal was 300,000. We ended up raising 240,000 in the pandemic on a crowdfunding campaign, which to us still seems insane. But that is how we got to where we are now. And I think anything else, Skip, you want to cover? I can take it afterwards in Q&A.
Oh, that's great. It's fantastic. In terms of the sort of idea or the origin of Mindcurrent, can you talk a little bit about, in a few minutes, just how that came to be?
Oh, okay. So, you know, this is for us here in Oregon. So I'm just going to give you guys the complete, honest, personal story. My eldest daughter was in kindergarten, and I got to audit her class as her dad. So I got to sit in one of those tiny kindergarten chairs and watch the kids. And I noticed that she, her friend, and a kid in front of her all lost interest in the class at almost the same time. And when a kid gets distracted, the kid next to them gets distracted. That's normal. But why did the boy in front of her lose interest at the same time? And that's where my mind, and then basically in the next 90 seconds, all the kids started to lose interest. So the idea came to me at the time that, wait, if we could see when kids are losing interest and not interrupt teachers because they have enough to do, right? But just give them that feedback in their curriculum, right? We could then tell teachers where kids are or aren't paying attention, and you know, proactively they could update their curriculum for better teaching without interrupting their class flow. And then I realized, wait, we're in the US. We're never gonna like read children's emotions in a classroom. That's a huge invasion of privacy. So we switched over to, wait, they're consenting adults. There are a lot of smartwatch wearers and the biometrics are fantastic. So that's how that's when I finally solidified the idea and I left my corporate career. And then when I brought my co-founder, Daniel Cunningham, he's one of the original architects of internet poker. So Daniel is obsessed with massive systems. And the fact that the privacy would be maintained, he came in, we interviewed a lot of, I think you know this, Skip, because I had asked you months ago. we interviewed a lot of psychologists, and Dr. Drew Brazier was the only one who had entrepreneurial experience. And then Dr. Drew joined us, and that's the three. These are the co-founders. And then, like I said, it's a machine learning company. So we've had 25,000 beta users. It takes a while to get your models accurate. And then, like we just talked about, Skip, that after that, the traction has all come from, like for us right now, healthcare is where all of the attention is. Because, for example, nurses are one of the only industries in America where high-paid professionals are voluntarily quitting their jobs. You just don't see that anywhere right now, given the job market, but nurses are still quitting because there's just nothing that's personally helping them.
Excellent. Next up on my screen is Lora.
Hey, Skip. So I can talk a little bit about our background. Me personally, I have over a decade of experience in healthcare, and after an honorable discharge from the U.S. Navy, I enrolled in a pre-med track at PCC through PSU, only to pivot into entrepreneurship because I had this life-altering orgasm. I wanted to actually recreate that experience on my own, and as a self-described anatomy geek, I became really fascinated with the psychological and physiological and anatomical aspects of the female orgasm. So I conducted my own research, gathered anatomical measurements from hundreds of people, and I discovered one common factor that stood out among all of them. Every single person I talked to had the same problem and the desire for a solution to this orgasm paradox that I did. The two biggest problems that were stifling that solution, though, was this lack of accurate data to inform an effective design and shame, a lot of shame. So I began designing my first data-driven product rooted in robotics and physiology, and I ended up leaving school to create functional specifications and design this device, ultimately determined to produce this physiologically informed product driven by microrobotics and biomimicry that would elicit this type of mind-bending orgasm. I'll get to the point here in a second. This product would allow each individual to pursue their own experiential journey to a better sexual health and wellness. And, my background is rooted in healthcare, but I have the vision to become a thought leader and a primary driver in a sexually equitable world, but I'm pretty new to business, so I ended up going to Oregon State University and putting together this really amazing team. And I was fortunate enough to build this really amazingly experienced team, starting at Oregon State. Within about I think it was like 8 or 9 months, we actually had 5 patents. And we had a prototype and proof of concept, and we took that prototype to the Consumer Electronics Show in 2019. This years fly by. And we applied for an award. We got this award. It was an international award. It was huge. It was supposed to put us on the map. And then a month later, they take this award away, citing us as being obscene and profane and immoral. And we're sitting there with our jaws on the floor going, wait, we thought that sexuality was sacred. And so what we did is we fought back, and we ended up getting an immense amount of PR, and they ended up with an immense amount of public backlash for demonizing female sexuality, essentially. So our mission is all about empowerment through sexual exploration. We provide products and services now that empower all humans to boldly embrace their sexuality through self-exploration and education. We do this through our very human and mission-based brand, where we aim to change the world through every individual's empowering journey of self-discovery. And you'll find as we answer some of these questions, I did not take the traditional track to funding. We actually took probably really similar to to everybody else here. We took the most convoluted track I possibly could in order to get to what we've raised over $5 million now, and we just launched this year. So we are actually opening another round, and we're also doing this round very unconventionally as well. Unfortunately, I can't talk about the details of that, but I look forward to talking about it next time we do this, because this one's going to be really interesting as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. And James.
I was on mute. I'm old school, so I brought slides. So hopefully you can see that. Oh, that's the end of my slide deck. Let me go to the beginning of my slide deck. So we're DeepSurface. We're a cybersecurity company. So the great thing about cybersecurity is you get to reinvent every part of cybersecurity every 4 or 5 years. So you get to come out with the next gen of whatever was hot 5 or 6 years ago and try again, make it better. The bad guys get better. We have to get better, that kind of thing. We're doing what's called predictive vulnerability management. So we're trying to tell you how things are going to go terribly wrong at your company so that you can fix it before they do. And that's a really hard problem because for a few reasons. Networks are terribly complex. If you take, we work with companies that have thousands of employees. If you take thousands of employees, all their accounts, all their machines, all their mobile devices, all the IoT devices on the network, and their hybrid connection to the cloud, and you start mapping all the different pathways that somebody could navigate that network and try to exploit it, that's very quickly a highly exponential number. You get to millions of pathways very quickly, and people can't, the best cybersecurity team in the world can't actually conceptualize in their head a million pathways and then pick which ones to go look at. But that's something that we can do with our product, right? The next thing is vulnerabilities. You guys hear every day about a new vulnerability that was exploited, and you always say, well, look, it was something stupid. Why didn't they just fix that? Well, that is exactly the problem. Networks are very complex. There are 400 new vulnerabilities coming out a week, and these teams have to take this incredibly complex network, look at all these new vulnerabilities, and make the right decision. And they have to be right every time. And that team is the third problem. The talent supply is not keeping up with this complex problem. So what we have here is a very complex network, always new vulnerabilities. We don't have enough people to come do the analysis work so that it's ripe for automation. And our CTO, about 4 years ago, he'd been doing penetration testing and application security testing for over a decade, and he kept seeing the same thing every time. I can come in, I can do a really good job of showing these people what they should do next, but normal humans can't do that in a timely way. They can't do it every day. So we need to automate all this. So we went out, talked to a group of CISOs here in town. They got very excited. They said, if you can do that, I will buy it. And so I'm giving you this background so we can talk about our funding experience. So Tim and I both have quarter of a century of experience each doing this stuff. I've raised money a few times. Tim is the regional expert on this kind of work. We have a great advisory board, people that came from the security space and have brought products to market for decades. And we've had a bunch of customers. So we have a whole bunch of local great names getting revenue from. We've got new betas starting and leadership approval on great companies. I know I'm going fast, but we had a bunch of great customers. So raising money, and our customers love us, a brag slide. I won't go through that one. So it should have been easy, right? It should have been easy raising money, and it wasn't, right? Just prior to when we started raising money, it was a great time to raise money. Deal flow was drying up. People were looking for places to put their money. We, like I said, are experienced founders. It's a huge market, $181 billion market. This is my 4th time raising money. We had happy customers and revenue. So we should have just been able to put out our pitch slide and people would be putting term sheets in front of us, but it wasn't. I did my first pitch to Ty. Ty has this pitch night where you get pizza and you come in and give a pitch to a warm crowd. And that was March 7th. And you know what happened on March 16th? We locked down the state, and nationwide, everything got locked down. So everything changed very fast. And I've tried to take this and look at it from the point of view of the funders. I understand why it changed fast. They had to scramble very quickly to make sure they had dry powder to keep their existing portfolio companies alive. They were thinking they were in a very hot market and everything was going to be great. And then all of a sudden they had to say, oh, everything's going to slow down to a crawl, maybe stop, maybe explode. We have to keep our companies in business. So they had to reserve all that capital. We also had 2 funds during their diligence of us change their investment thesis right in the middle of the process. So we were going a very traditional route. We're going to do seed, we're going to do A, we're going to do B, you know, and grow the company. And that because cybersecurity companies, once you have a good idea, you have got to get it out in the market, get some market share fast. You've got to go fast, so you need some outside funding. You can't sell fast enough to get through that market. So that's why we went that traditional way. But we had companies literally saying, one said, we aren't really going to do seed anymore. This is after we're pitching to them and going through diligence for seed. They wanted to become basically a round A company. We had another company that did A's and B's say, we want to start doing seed. So we had this happen to us right in the middle of our pitching. We had 2 funds start down the process and then tell us we don't have any money. So we're like, well, that would have been you know, maybe my bad. I should have qualified you at the beginning, but they didn't have any money. But they said, but you know, we have a whole bunch of people that are on our team. They may be interested in going with you. So you know, that's not what we were there pitching for. But all of that changed really fast. So we had a few gut punches along the way. We thought we were done with one of them, and I got the call on a Saturday while I was working in my garage, and they said, we're sorry, this isn't going to work for us. We love you guys. Tell us what we can do to be helpful, but we can't give you the money. So we had to reset at that point. It's probably halfway through the process. And in the end, we got no's where we expected to get yeses, and we got yeses from unexpected places. And we were shooting to raise 850, and then about 2 weeks ago, we closed on our millionth dollar. So we got $1 million to go do what we have to do next, which is get a whole bunch of enterprise companies in the pipeline and go from there.
Excellent. So we've got a wide variety of different stories that we've assembled here on the panel. And next up, we have Jelani.
Hey, how's it going? Well, wonderful to hear everybody's story. I love all the differences in not just what you're working on, but how you sort of raised your cash. I'll take you back 8 years. 8 years ago, I started a company called Circle. I had no business starting it. I had no background in technology or software or product or marketing. I was a photographer at the time. But lo and behold, we spent 3 years getting to market, ended up raising $30 million for that business. And it was my PhD in learning how to start a startup, run a startup, fail at running a startup, succeed at it, and everything in between. And I found myself in 2018 with 5 kids, 1 on the way, and really just sort of burned out. You know, I had been at it for about 7 years building that company and was ready for a bit of a change. And so I took on a personal project outside of work that was to write a book for my kids. And when I sat down to figure out what I wanted to write about, I really wanted to create something for my soon-to-be son and help him navigate his own racial identity as well as help him understand mine. So that ended up being a book called A Kid's Book About Racism that was never designed to ever be sold to anybody, just to be given to my own 6 children. And so I wrote it, I designed it, and printed all of 1 copy because that was all it was ever supposed to be, and showed my kids, and they loved it. They thought I was a cool dad who gave them a cool thing. But I made the mistake of showing it to other friends, other entrepreneurs, other parents. And they were like, this is really cool. Can I take it? And I was like, no, this is my 1 copy. But that conversation happened again and again and again. And I was like, why are people responding so positively to this book? It's filled with spelling errors, grammar errors. It has no pictures inside of it. And it's on an impossible to talk about subject. But that was it. It was a gateway for them to have a conversation with their kids that felt impossible. So 3 months later, I left the company that I started right after we raised a $20 million Series B round to go start another crazy startup from scratch. And so that ended up becoming a kid's book about. 8 months later, we launched out into the world with 12 books, 6 ready to ship, 6 on pre-order, all on challenging, empowering, and important topics like racism, like cancer, like gratitude, like adventure, like anxiety, like depression, and so many more. Now we're over 30 plus books. We'll have another 10 out before the end of the year, have sold 150,000 plus books, and it's just been off to the races. In terms of fundraising, what's great is I got to pull in all my learnings from the last business and then make a whole bunch of really terrible decisions, like get out of software and get into books, which is, you know, when you talk about venture backable products, books aren't typically it. And further that, you know, kids' books on tough topics, and then doing something that no publishers do, going direct to consumer. But I knew that what we were up to was pretty magical, and I knew my ability to execute and pull the team together was going to be sound enough to get there. So we were really lucky to find other angels, operators, entrepreneurs, folks with a little bit of cash in the bank to cut checks between, you know, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 25,000. A handful wrote bigger checks, and we took a really deliberate approach to raising our funds. I think we raised about 180 before we launched and spent the next 10 months raising it in really small checks as we went. And one of the things I put a premium on was having more underrepresented individuals on our cap table. Turned out when we raised $30 million at Circle, there wasn't a brown person to be spoken of on the cap table except for me. And so I wanted to make sure that we found more Black and brown individuals to make it onto our cap table, as well as women. And so hence we slowed down sort of who we pitched and how we pitched them to make sure that we found folks who were often writing their first check and who were often unaccredited, but who we wanted on this journey with us. And then finally closed the round in June of this year, and was sort of beating back checks because we had had some accelerated growth and everybody was trying to offer us money, but am really sort of incredibly happy with the investors that we have, the round that we raised, you know. And if I look at it, I've got a sheet over here of all the investors we have. Gosh, there's almost like 35 or 40 of them. All of varying check sizes, some seed funds, again, some angels, operators, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. This is not by any stretch a clean cap table, but it's the exact kind of cap table that I want for my company.
That's a really inspiring story, Jelani. And I think what's really interesting about it too is, you know, did you have any institutional folks get involved in addition to individuals in some of the smaller check writing?
Yeah, we did. So first big check in pre-launch was one from Color, fund run by Jamie Schmidt and Chris Cantino. And they had a lot of conviction early on, and thankfully I kept proving them right. And then Cascade Seed Fund came in with our largest check. I think I can say that. I don't think that's private. Portland Seed Fund invested as well. And I think from an institutional perspective, that's all our institutionals. All the rest are all angel operators.
That's great. You know, one thing that I'm intrigued by is, you know, Jelani, with sort of a lot of smaller dollar investors, you end up with potentially a more complicated cap table. And Sourabh, with fundraising, that's also one thing that people often talk about is it's great that you can kind of source a lot of different folks participating, but then the question is, as you go to subsequent rounds, are you dealing with a more complicated cap table that could potentially cause some complications in conversations with other later funders? And I know that, Jelani, you've had experience in, you know, later rounds with your first startup. I'm wondering if you could share some insight in terms of your approach and how you're kind of thinking through some of those issues as you think about further scale. And Sourabh, I'd also be interested in your perspective on that too. Jelani,
yeah. So it does present some issues, but I don't think it presents any more issues than it would, than all the other things that can present issues. Turns out when people want to give you money, they will find any reason to give you money, no matter what the valuation is, no matter what your cap table looks like. If you have a great product and great traction and great numbers, they will write you a term sheet and they will give you money, and that will happen at both the A and the B. And it turns out if you don't have traction, if you don't have numbers, if you're struggling with revenue, they'll pick you apart at every turn. And mostly that's just to get the price right for them or figure out whether you're the kind of company they want to invest in. What often happens in these situations is when you go to raise an A after your C and you've got, you know, a cap table full of unaccredited investors, is those investors often get a buyout offer at that point where they get to make an early exit and get to make sometimes a 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x, depending on what the valuation is. And that's huge, right? Because they're not in it for the 10-year long haul. They're in it for the, I gave you $2,000 and I kind of need it back. You know what I mean? I made a bet on you, but I kind of need the money. And I love that kind of sort of wealth creation. What's great is we got to do that at Circle as well. We got to have a bunch of early investors who cut small checks, exit at the A, and then the investors get what they want. They get a cleaner cap table that's a lot more simple to manage. And then, you know, when you hit the B, it's the same thing all over again to some extent, minus sort of having those investors get bought out. But the B investors are going to be really critical of numbers, traction, revenue. And if you're doing well, anybody who writes your check. If you're doing poorly, it's a struggle and you're pitching. And for me in this business, what was really funny is it took us 8 months to raise $500,000, and it took me 3 weeks to raise the other $500,000. It's because our numbers just were like, whoop. And at that point, you just send screenshots of your Shopify, you know, and you just go, are you writing me a check today or tomorrow? Because you should, right? And it simplifies it. And as much as I believe in our product and our team, it really came down to the traction and the numbers to push people over the edge to write checks.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I have to say this, Jelani. It's been on my mind since you told me the story about your kids. You know, there was an investment banker who thought that maybe there was a business in books, and he raised $1 million from 22 people, and he's doing all right in Seattle. You know, just to say, buddy, right? So just to say, right? Let's not write out literature, pun intended. I would say that, you know, I probably have the most complicated cap table, guilty, right? Crowdfunding, it's 160 people, right? That made up that 240. But I think Jelani actually said it, so I'm going to be really brief here. It's all down to the person. And that is true, except when you have a situation you can't control, like an institutional investor, where the lead has actually changed. And, you know, you do your best, you rebuild the relationship, and then you get back. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes the person comes in and is like, I would have never made this investment. Oh, great. This is going to be a great 7 years with you, buddy, right? But with everybody else, we had the opposite discussion because we do not have that tangible product, right? We don't have 12 titles. We have something people can understand, but are really hoping sells like crazy. So I had to have the opposite discussion. And I think it's important, Skip, to make this comparison. I once spent 45 minutes with somebody who told me at the end, I'm investing $25,000 in your company. I did not know he was going to invest when we had that conversation. I also had a 3-hour conversation with a long haul truck driver who invested $100 at the end of those three hours and canceled his investment in another WeFunder, right? The one thing though that we had to do in every conversation is we had to tell them, I had to ask them, it's a trick question. When are you looking to get a return? When you need the money back? And if anyone said anything other than, I don't expect it back, they can't invest in Mindcurrent. Because we have to be honest, we're an AI startup. We could exit in 3 years, we could exit in 10, we could be finished next year. We don't have the tangible product, right? So since it's the person that matters, I think the transparency in keeping the relationship, that monthly update and touch point, is how a complex cap table still allows you, when the time comes, to get your investors to make the right decision, for themselves, but also for the growth of the company. Without the growth of the company, there is no return on the investment.
And Sourabh, earlier you mentioned something that I think was interesting, which was your marketing background. And so when you were doing fundraising, whether it's crowdfunding or if you're doing this in terms of VCs, you mentioned, you know, it always helps to have customers. And Jelani mentioned this too. Like if you've got some money coming in, you've got some interesting customers that you're racking up, it's going to give you more leverage in a lot of these conversations. And so marketing is key for early stage startups in many respects. And Lora, I wanted to get your thoughts here because arguably the marketing that you all have done in the PR is just astounding. And I'm wondering to what extent that played a role in your fundraising strategy.
I mean, before the shit hit the fan?
Either.
I mean, it definitely did. The award itself was definitely going to be a part of my pitch plan. And we were in the middle of raising a round, and I was talking to investors at the time when they revoked that award, because in talking to early investors, there was obviously a lot of skepticism. I mean, come on. If I walked into a room with all of you and the first words out of my mouth were vagina or orgasm, how do you think you would react? I mean, it was a little awkward at times. In fact, actually, I remember the very first pitch contest was also tie. And I did win, but I also literally, the very first thing that I said when I started my pitch, because I realized I was at the very end of the day, and also the last round and the last participant to go after like 6 hours of pitching all day long. And everybody in the whole room is sitting here doing this. And I just went, so we're here to talk about orgasms today. And everybody went, okay, you have my attention. But after CES, we went viral. I think a lot of those investors who were before that kind of even embarrassed about the subject, recognized that that precedent, that there is indeed room for serious traction in this market, and that the market for femme-designed sex tech is extremely ripe, and it's huge. Last year, the entire health and wellness market was valued at 4.2 trillion, and depending on which market study you look at, the sex tech market is valued at approximately 30 billion. Currently, and it's projected to land in the realm of anywhere between 50 and 100 billion plus in the next 3 to 7 years. But we're not exactly content for just a share of the sex tech market. We've actually had so many mentions associated with each parent industry, with nearly 70,000 mentions associated with health, 5,600 mentions in wellness, and nearly 4,000 mentions within femtech. Our brand is taking up a lot of mainstream space, and you can bet that is actually by design. And after this PR event, it was a lot easier to locate a group of like-minded investors for the opportunity fund that invested in our company. We're a consumer products play based on two main ideas. Number one, what kind of intellectual property and protectable technologies can you develop? And two, who's your audience? We're in a fortunate position where we have 11 patents and patents pending to protect our intellectual property, and we've curated an incredible audience with a following of over 100K in under a year across multiple platforms. So yeah, we've got results. We're going to do about 8 to 10 million in revenue this year, and we've got the intellectual property to protect our hero product and that entire line of biomimetic microrobotic products that we've created. And we have a following and community that's really excited about our message that's rooted in empowerment. It's a sexual conversation that doesn't end at sex, relationships, or even body image. We believe that sexuality informs identity. And when we're secure in our identities, that builds confidence. That confidence is what empowers us to go out and change the world for the better, each in our own way. So I want to be able to empower people of all genders to explore, educate, love, and accept themselves and others, because we believe that this will actually provide people with the confidence to create a more equitable world. And that doesn't start with the next generation, that starts today. And we've found that these investors really understand that that kind of traction with our audience, that's what's valuable.
Excellent. And a related topic is, as we think about sort of whether it's crowdfunding or another form of capital like venture is, I think, often described as relatively exclusive. As a first-time entrepreneur, it can be really tough to break into the networks to even get that warm referral in. It's the province of white males who all went to the same school, right? And so, James, I'm wondering, you've had success with 4 other companies, or at least been involved in fundraising with 4 other companies, and now the current one. And I'm wondering, like, what tactics did you use in terms of getting networked in to get those warm referrals? And would love to kind of hear from some of the other panelists too, once you've gone, James, about sort of what's worked and what hasn't when trying to get connected into different investors at different stages.
Sure. Well, I started by being a white male, so that really helped. That opened a lot of doors. So I absolutely recognize that advantage you have when you're sitting in front of people whose job it is to do pattern matching, and they're trying to see, have I seen this before? I fit right into that, right? And I came from previous tech companies and had some consulting background. So, these guys are absolutely, connecting with me early on. So that was super helpful. And that's not good advice, right? I can't tell you that that's good advice, because you got to work with where you're coming from. And everybody else on this panel didn't have that opportunity to come from that position. So I think the most important thing you can do very early is start going to some of the events that people like Cascade and Portland Seed Fund are putting on. So they have Ask Me Anything nights where you can, or I guess they're not nights, but events where you can just get on and start interacting with these people. And I know Julie and Robert will take time to meet with anybody and talk to you about your ideas. So go to the places that are focused regionally, first of all, and start talking to them. They will, Cascade led our round, and when they did, they immediately brought in the next biggest check by saying, going to somebody else and saying, you guys should take a look at this. It's right up your alley. So they know everybody, and they co-invest with all kinds of companies. So that's the best advice I could give you, is engage with those organizations that are in it for the long haul, that have multiple funds, are going to be around for a while, and will take time to sit down with you and coach you. We literally, when we started this company 3 years ago, just before that, one of the early founders sat down with Cascade and pitched them on the idea and said, what do we need to, because we knew we were going to bootstrap for a while, what do we need to do for a while so that when it's time to raise money, you'll be interested? And they laid it out for us. So they'll do that for you.
And Jelani, you mentioned some of the institutional investors that participated, and some of them were not the typical, like, all white male venture firms with all the same LPs who look identical to one another. And I'm wondering, with that change happening, do you see an opportunity there for folks to kind of take slightly different approaches when it comes to getting networked into sources of capital?
Yeah, this is a tough one. Here's the model that I subscribe to, and like James, I don't know if this is transferable, but I hope and believe that it is, and I think it's what is in the bones of most entrepreneurs, and specifically underrepresented entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of color, is just to be so good that they can't ignore you. Bit of a Steve Martin quote there. So my plan was, I was going to try and play at such a higher level from a company brand execution standpoint. I was going to stack the chips so much in favor of what we were building for a kid's book about that I'd have people like begging to write me a check. Now that was the hope. And in some instances I would sit down with somebody and have coffee and they'd be like, hey, are you taking checks? And I'm like, are you writing checks? Cause I thought we were having coffee. And other times having people say, no, I think this is a terrible idea. Books will never work, blah, 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 blah. But I think that's the edge that's often required, that hopefully gets you to numbers that don't lie. And that'll get you into some of those rooms and some of those meetings and get you past some of those, unconscious biases or the pattern matching where you don't fit the pattern. It doesn't mean those things don't exist. It means it just helps you overcome some of those things. Now,
You
that
did
being
a great
said,
job of that at Circle as well. I mean, your product looked great, felt great.
oh,
You know,
thank you.
you did I was one of your beta customers, and I thought, you know, finally a consumer home filtering product that doesn't look like a piece of garbage.
That's far too kind, James. Thank you. And then in terms of like how to get in the room, how to get those intros, how to get those emails, is you just become dogged about it. Hit people up on Twitter, send cold emails, send stuff through the contact forms, through people's websites, talk to someone who knows someone who knows someone. Like I just started to broadcast out into the world. I'm doing this kids book thing. I'm going to raise some money. It's going to be like this. And then eventually you get to that 50th person who's like, oh, I know somebody with money. and you start having conversations. And it was funny after a while, because Portland Seed Fund came in too. Somebody's like, hey, have you talked to Portland Seed Fund? I was like, nope, I haven't yet. And then it was like, another person's like, hey, have you talked to them yet? I was like, no, I haven't. I don't know anybody there. And like, okay. And then the fifth person was like, I can make you an intro there. And I was like, great. That would be awesome because I don't know anybody there. And it was a great meeting and they had a lot of conviction and I sort of challenged them. And I think this is also important for entrepreneurs to do. I'm gonna go a little long here on the answer, is to understand that you're in the place of power to decide who gets to be on this journey with you to build the company. Like you're the operator, you know the business, you know the brand, you know the market, you know what's possible with what you can do and execute, and you're working on it every day. The investor's just along for the ride. They're buying a train ticket, right? Like you're the train, like you're going to the really cool place and you're inviting to take them with you. And so, with Portland Seed Fund, and I did this with a lot of investors, I go, why do you want to invest in a kids book company? Like what makes you think that's a good idea? And sort of have them tell me back, what do you like about my business that makes you think this can work? And once they start on that talk track, you start to go, okay, I think I believe that you believe the same things that I do about where I'm going. Let's go do this together, right? So a bit of a roundabout way to answer the question in terms of how do you get into those rooms and those warm intros. But I do think there's something to be said about making your product so good that people can't ignore it.
Well said. And Laura, I wanted to get your take too on, you used a relatively unconventional vehicle to do some fundraising in the form of an opportunity zone this last round. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we presented to a number of venture capitalists, but our funding rounds have actually been from high net worth individuals that were attracted to our CES Robotics Award initially. And these high net worth individuals found it highly advantageous to invest their capital gains into our funding vehicle. So what we did was form an opportunity zone fund that invested in the company. And so for us to find these like-minded individuals was pretty clear cut. And then there was the additive for those individuals so that they wouldn't have to pay taxes on their capital gains if they held the investment for 10 years. What was always a really good investment became a clear-cut, no-brainer investment very quickly. I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget that there are high net worth individuals out there, and like Jelani was saying, it just takes time, just talking to the right people that know the right people that might know the right people, and hopefully they know the right people, but eventually you'll get there. But they're out there, and you want to find people that are either in your industry or interested in participating in your mission. And that's what we were looking for, people that were interested in our mission. And entrepreneurs, I don't know, I think they do take a little time to actually go out and approach. If they actually did take a little bit of time to go out and approach these high net worth individuals, they might just think, a lot of the time they just think, oh, I need to go out and pursue a venture capitalist because that's how it's been done, and it's supposed to be done, and that's how all these business magazines tell me what I'm supposed to do. I need to find venture capitalist money. So we took the opposite approach. Let's find these high net worth individuals that have heard of us because of the CES thing, and find them that they're in alignment with our mission, and let's give them a really great deal with this fund. And the Opportunity Zone Fund is a good thing too, because we have to maintain our business in a certified opportunity zone. and provide jobs for that designated community. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone around.
Awesome. And I know Justin would kill me if I didn't take the remaining time to roll out Mentimeter and see how that works. So we'll get that underway. So for folks who are on, feel free to either use the QR code or your web browser to enter some questions, and we'll see what pops up here.
Hey, while people are doing that, I'll say, Skip, this is something where Tao could really step in and provide some sessions where you're saying, so you want to raise money, here's some guidelines, and tell me where you're headed, and we'll make some introductions to like-minded people, like Laura was talking about. So Tao could really help there to help people bootstrap their fundraising journey.
That's a fantastic idea. I mean, we do a lot of work with a variety of the incubators and accelerators throughout the state. And
this would be like before that, you know?
Yeah, yep, for sure. And yeah, I love the idea. James, you interested in signing up as one of the volunteers?
Sure, I'll teach the class. That'd be great.
Awesome.
I only know one way of doing it, so you're gonna have these other people on the call talk about a variety of different ways. So,
of course.
I just saw the comment about this. I'm assuming you mean the women. The comment about
the Princess Leia, yeah,
resistance. I actually drew that in 2015 for the Women's March in Portland. I've just had it ever since.
That's awesome. Hey, Jelani, along the same lines, are those all the books behind you that represent both those that are currently available and then the ones that are soon to be available?
Yeah, there's some new hidden little gems in there if I can hop out of the way.
Yeah.
Of course, some other books that aren't even ours, but are really cool. And then a small, so right here, are all action figures. I collected action figures as a kid, but these are all ones I've collected as an adult, and they're all action figures of color. And I started collecting them a while ago to sort of see how many are there.
Right.
And it turns out there's a lot. And it's a good reminder for me, and hopefully for some other folks on the call, like, you know, everybody's not just a white male, to put it bluntly. There are superheroes who look like me. And it's a good reminder for me and for my kids as you know, I try and raise them that they too can be superheroes too.
I also wanted to just throw this in there because I do think we're at a point in 2020 where diversity and inclusion isn't always on the outside. And I think we have certainly experienced this before we put out our first prototype. And if this had happened, it would have just been stupid. But before we put out our first prototype, we had a deal from traditional angel, you know, white guys, 2 of them. A $900K deal we wouldn't raise after that. We'd go straight to institutional seed because it's an AI company, right? And that deal fell through. And after that, I met with probably about 15 people who looked and had the background just like that. And I basically came to the conclusion that when you're in the big boy club, when you're in the network, right, you're looking for the 3-year exit because that's the competition you're dealing with. Everybody else has these amazing stories and you want yours. I think the one thing that we learned is, like, I think Jelani said it, it has been really simple to understand where the smart money is for us, because the question hasn't been, are you writing a check? It's, what would you like to do for Mindcurrent? Do you want to work here? That's the smartest investor I can find. Do you want to work here? Because I need a CISO in 9 months, right?
We might actually have a couple of those too. 100%. That is probably the best piece of advice ever, because some of our advisors, you know, they're actually equity invested advisors, and they're my general counsel. They're 100%, and they would work here. But I mean, you're brilliant.
Oh, sorry. Okay. But you know, the thing is, some of the folks, like Laura just said, that will work there and will build her brand and will take her and the company she acquires along her way, because she's going to be the incumbent, you can tell. She's not going to be the disruptor for much longer. She's going to take others on her way. They're not all going to be externally diverse. But a lot of people are carrying that internally. They are supporting all the things you need. They just happen to be a white guy. And that is what we learned when we had such a broad set of investors come in, of people that were investing that actually at this point, I don't pay them, but they are working for Mindcurrent, right? I don't pay them. Actually, they paid me, I guess, right? Because they invested. But they are absolutely committed to the diversity that we are committed to, even though they don't have that background. And I just wanted to say that because I do think that we have gone beyond just the external measure of what the investor looks like.
Well said. All right, so we got 2 questions. The first one, in the remaining time, what can funds do to make the process easier, more straightforward?
One thing they can do is just explain what their process looks like and what are the gating steps along the way, because you never know, unless they tell you. And another great thing would be don't change that along the way. Don't move the goalposts. But I understand we had to do that over the last 6 months, so that was okay. But in the future, let's stay away from that.
All right. And Justin, what's the other one? Let's see if we can pull the other question up. That's another good one.
Oh, can I take this one?
Yes.
Okay, so when I set about to start a publishing company with no discernible background or ability to do that, I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. I don't know the first thing about printing books. I still don't really. I'm not a designer necessarily. I'm not an illustrator by any stretch. I just have kids. I don't know a lot about kids, to be honest. But when it came to what I wanted to do with my business, which is make really important books for kids on challenging topics that were for the ages of kids that I had in my home, and be unflinching about diving into those things head first, I realized that I was unique in the world, and having both white kids and brown kids, having entrepreneurial experience, having grown up without a dad, and with a mom who worked all the time, so we never talked about anything. So I made it a habit to talk about everything with my kids. That as far as publishing CEOs go, I'm the only one in the world like me. So it meant that I was going to make a book unlike any other publishing CEO in existence. And so I think for every entrepreneur, those things that make you totally different, totally sort of cut from a different cloth, they're your competitive edge. They mean that you will make something that nobody else can even imagine, because it's all your combined traits and abilities and ideas and experiences put together to make that one thing that the world needs to solve that problem that nobody else can solve.
Really good.
I may add on to that a little bit, because from my personal experience, and that is 100% just nail on the head, Jelani. I had that imposter syndrome where I sat back for a very long time and was just like, nope, I don't need to do this. This is like, somebody else is going to do it. I don't know anything about business. I thought entrepreneurs started restaurants and mom and pop shops or something like that. But the fact still remained, I had this vision of eradicating sexual stigma and shame. Nobody else was going to do that. I was the only one that had that idea. I was the only one that had this idea for this product. And no one else was going to take that idea from me and run with it. So if you have an amazing idea that could change the way that we approach problems, that can help people solve problems and make their lives easier, guess what? No one else is going to do it. You are the only person that can go and do that. And when you do, you probably don't know how to run a business. You probably don't know how to handle finance. You probably don't know even how to do marketing. I can tell you, I didn't know how to do any of those things. And I still don't necessarily. That's not my job. That is why we've hired such amazing people on our team to make sure that those are done appropriately and properly. by some amazing people that have amazing potential, and that is what their expertise is. Your expertise is knowing what the problem is and how to solve it, and then how to be the most like amazing spokesperson for that brand. You are the brand. And that's what I had to discover, is that my job as a CEO wasn't to market a product, wasn't necessarily to figure out how to do the financing, wasn't how to do the engineering, though I work very closely with all of these teams. My job was to make sure that the product actually made it into the market and that it was doing what I said I wanted it to do. My job is to eradicate that sexual stigma. And that's what we're doing. And that's what your job is, to figure out what the thing that you want to do, and then go run with it, because no one else is going to do it for you.
All right, and with that, we're a little bit over. So I want to say thank you to our panelists for taking some time to join us today. This was actually one of the more fun and interesting panels I think I've had the pleasure of being involved in just as a moderator. I learned quite a bit as well, and hope that all of the participants who joined us did too. Wanted to give a shout out to John D'Alfonsi with Roth Capital Partners. They're really creative and do some really interesting work with companies that are trying to get to that next stage of financing. He's here on a regular basis throughout the state, and always looking for companies that need some creative access to capital and help along the way. He's been a great partner of TAO over the years as well, and we really appreciate him. And so with that, I will be concluding this session. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of others coming up as part of our finance series this fall. We'll be doing one session on cash flow management and another one on some M&A trends as we head into the end of the year. So again, thank you all to our panelists and to everyone who joined us tonight. Have a good night.